What is going on, everyone? Week 3 here for Off the Grid, Flex, and Roster Decision Show. And ooh-wee, there is a whole position this week, John, that I almost just don't want to talk about because I had a very tough time ranking it. And it's up to the viewers to kind of guess because, good Lord, is there just a whole position that is just awful. But beyond that, John, how has your week been? How was your week 2? How's it going over there?
Week 2 was up and down. It was a kind of a weird week. But overall, it's, as we know, it's a grind. We can't get too high or too low, regardless of whether we're winning or losing. So just have to stay with it and, just kind of stay focused and stay with your process, which hopefully is watching and listening to us here and all the wonderful stuff on the Gridiron Ratings channel.
Yeah, definitely kick it off if you're enjoying this show. We have 3 other shows on the channel. You got me 3 nights a week on the GR Weekly. We got Gary and the crew over there Tuesdays and Thursdays, getting defensive. And on Saturday, they got the slate, breaking down all the DFS sort of stuff, making you some money and all that, which I could use because I am broke as hell. But here we're going to kick off with the 4 main positions. We're going to start with quarterback. John, I'm going to throw it over to you, though. Who's the first quarterback you want to talk about on here on the show?
Oh, man. Honestly, I know the first one is probably going to be a layup, and so I'm just going to leave that there for my guy, Matt, because I know he's got it on the list. But I'm going to go with this other guy because we just got breaking news earlier today as we record this, 5:45 Eastern. Justin Fields will be the starting quarterback for the Chicago Bears as they take on the Cleveland Browns this week. And I'm all for it. Like I said last week, I'm all about them legs, and Justin Fields brings that. Expert consensus rankings quarterback 18. I think got to give some time for some of the news to catch up, obviously, but he's a top 7, top 8 quarterback for me when you consider again what he brings with the rushing upside, the weapons that he has in Allen Robinson, in Darnell Mooney. We've already seen the willingness to use him as a rusher, had 10 carries in the game last week and a rushing touchdown. So, or he had the rushing touchdown the week before. But either way, Justin Fields, he's a dynamic player. The matchup is great here. Cleveland, small sample size, only been 2 weeks, but Cleveland gives with the 3rd most fantasy points to the quarterback position. That includes Patrick Mahomes, but it also includes, Tyrod Taylor, who was lighting them up before he left with injuries. So I'm all about Justin Fields this week.
Yeah, it's going to take me a little bit to probably put him into my top 12. I'll say I'd start him over Ryan Tannehill, who is outside my top 12. But into the top 12 for me right now is a little tough. I didn't think he looked particularly sharp being thrown in that week 2 contest against Cincinnati, but it's still a matter of I respect Cleveland's defense and I respect the pass rush. If he burns me, I'm fine with it. There is a good amount of strong top 12 options I'm currently not going to lean to. But there's a few players we need to speak about because, again, this is a roster decision show, and we have to talk about some players who we might even be up on but actually be a little down on. And a player I actually really want to show out in week 1 who we never really thought we'd have to be talking about is Josh Allen. So Josh Allen has been one of the worst starting quarterbacks over the first 2 weeks, and I never really expected him to show up on this show. Currently, quarterback 18 points scored through 2 weeks, no rushing touchdowns, only around like 225 passing yards on average. These are not been fantasy points that we've been exactly excited about to see. With this matchup against Washington, who Daniel Jones was able to actually be good because Daniel Jones is a top 5 quarterback right now, oddly enough, right? But I need Allen to showcase that he is a quarterback that we needed to see, be a top 3 sort of producer. So again, this is a roster decision show, and there are some players, who I consider in line with or to start over. Let's say you got Matthew Stafford late. Let's say you got Jalen Hurts late. Let's say you have Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins against Seattle, I'm considering starting over Josh Allen. Now, am I going to do that in week 3? No. But if this is week 14 and we've seen Josh Allen struggle a year, Kirk Cousins would be pretty easily for me in this matchup. I don't like that he's just not putting up good, accurate numbers as well. He's not being able to really find success when he's not throwing to Stephon Diggs. Now, we saw last year that was such a great source of fantasy points, which is that Diggs Allen connection. But I need to be comfortable with him targeting the rest of his receiving core. Gabriel Davis has pretty much been phased out. So you have the two older guys in Cole Beasley and Emmanuel Sanders. Now, did last week's game can get completely uncompetitive with Tua being out? Of course. But now against Washington, if he doesn't show up, the panic button is officially being pressed. So I need him to show up this week. Still a top 10 quarterback, but he's not a top 5 option this week whatsoever.
Yeah, that one is definitely tough, right? Because if you have Josh Allen, you drafted him high, probably as a top 3, top 4 quarterback potentially. You're expecting, those big games from Josh Allen. And the reason why we were willing to play Josh Allen 2 years ago, even before last year, was because of the legs. And you're not like you mentioned, hasn't rushed for a touchdown yet.
Yeah, 30 rushing yards in each game, which is a good amount, but it's not 50, it's not 60. It's not, like Kyler Murray, Hurts. These guys are going to like really pick up good production numbers because 60 yards per game equals 1,000-yard season. Now we're not saying Josh Allen's going to do that. But he was also scoring 8 touchdowns on the ground, and he hasn't done any of that so far through 2 weeks.
Yeah, and that's the thing, right? Is Josh Allen? He's never been a high yardage guy in the rushing yards department. I mean, his career high was as a rookie, almost 53 yards a game. Even he's actually rushing for more yards per game right now than he has each of the last 2 years. He's up almost near 40 yards per game right now. But like you said, not getting those touchdowns. But he's still excuse me. I have to clear my.
Listen, it's all good. Because like I said, Josh Allen right now consensus a top 5 quarterback for week 3. And I do not have that way. I'm one of the lowest rankers on him because I really need to see it. And this is a point of contention for me actually having him be a solid producer. If he completely, ignores my standpoint and goes and puts out a good performance against Washington, good, because that's what I want to see. But he has not been a good recommended top 5 option through 2 weeks. And there's just a lot of very good quarterbacks in the NFL.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely concerning through 2 weeks if you have some Josh Allen. And I do have some Josh Allen, so I definitely feel it. But the 2 matchups, the first one wasn't great. It was against Pittsburgh. Last year we thought that was a tough matchup for him. The year before when he was a rookie, we thought it was a tough matchup for him. And it has been. And so, 51 pass attempts, that's what you want to see from Josh Allen. At least that's the encouraging part to me. The last week against Miami, you could just, like you said, that game was pretty much over after 2 left.
Yeah.
So, there's not much reason to really go there with him. So I think in more competitive games like Kansas City, I think that he gets them in week 5. He gets Houston next week, which would be a nice matchup for him. I'm going to play Josh Allen this week, but I'm definitely with you. Probably not expecting the top 3, top 5 upside that we're expecting week to week. But
yeah, it's just when you barely get over 50% against a team that's kind of getting smoked and just kind of allowing you to do what you will. Again, he did get stopped on the 1-yard line because of a weird technicality that he didn't get the rushing touchdown. I felt that in a few leagues, but I am one of the lowest rankers. I'm taking a stand on him. I'm saying that he is a not particularly just layup option this week. But we'll move on. We'll spend some time on some other players. Who's the second quarterback you want to talk about?
Yeah, I mean, you referenced him. I thought maybe you would bring him up, so I'm going with Daniel Jones. I'm going to take my layup back. Self alley-oop here.
I pass it back to you. It's all good.
But going up against Atlanta, he's had back-to-back weeks of over 20 points. He's 8th at the position in fantasy points per dropback. Going up against Atlanta, who's 7th in fantasy points per dropback. That matchup makes for the 6th best combination when you add up those 2 metrics. Atlanta's giving up almost an 11% touchdown rate on the year. This should be a really good spot for Daniel Jones, who, again, top 10 quarterback for me this week. And, again, brings the rushing upside as well. So, ran for 95 yards last week. Could have been 150 if he doesn't get that touchdown called, the second touchdown potentially called back. But, definitely like that floor there from our quarterbacks.
Yeah, and with him, it's really a matter of if Rodgers wasn't playing San Francisco, one of these other quarterbacks is possibly playing San Francisco, I possibly, let's say if Allen was playing San Fran or Cousins was playing San Fran, that last few spots are very tough. Rodgers, Cousins, Jones, and Fields now my quarterback 14. That whole area is very tough for me to rank real quick. But a player I think we have to talk a little bit more about. I'm a little bit just worried about his possible status for week 3. But I think going forward, Derek Carr needs to be talked about in light that he's going to possibly be a top 12 option. The good thing right now is that we don't have a lot of big time quarterback injuries. The quarterbacks that did get hurt were not 12 options. So we have Tua, we have Andy Dalton, Carson Wentz. These are all guys that I believe are all 3 not playing this week. Tyrod Taylor's not playing in week 3. So 4 quarterbacks not playing this week. But all 4 of those were not top 12 options we were considering. So Derek Carr doesn't move up any further. But Derek Carr is my quarterback 16. So in a 2 quarterback or super flex sort of situation, I still like Miami's defense. They kind of get just kind of picked apart, and the offense just kind of fell to the wayside because of how Tua going out mid-game and Brissett's just not a very good quarterback. That's the issue. But I like Carr enough. He showed up against Baltimore. He showed up against Pittsburgh. I think I'm actually probably too low on him, and I think I should probably move him ahead of Fields and Tannehill as my quarterback 14. He's really just playing very good football, and he just did it against 2 defenses that I consider as overall units possibly both top 10 when they're fully healthy. Pittsburgh was not in week 2, which is an issue. Actually, talk about that Cincinnati game because some players I want to talk about that later in the show. So I'm going to move that. I'm going to move Carr up to quarterback 14. If we didn't have the Daniel Jones and Kirk Cousins matchups, I think he'd be competing for a top 12 spot. I just really like that Seattle game because there's not a lot of very good games this week. And so you can just kind of hinge on the ones that are good, take advantage of it. And Daniel Jones is playing currently the best matchup in quarterback for best matchup in fantasy football for quarterbacks. Then again, they just had like 5 passing touchdowns against Tom Brady. So Atlanta is just giving up a ton of points. But Derek Carr, just if you want to even have him on your bench right now, do so. Because I think at a certain point when situations start getting wonky, Vegas is really saying, hey, you're going to be our main guy. Josh Jacobs is hurt, which also might be a difference. But right now, I like Carr a lot.
Yeah, no, he's my quarterback 14 right now on the money. I said this a couple weeks ago, actually recently on the Fantasy Football Diagnostics podcast, but Derek Carr is matchup proof. And the reason I say that is you could kind of see it at points last year too. I mean, he threw up the occasional dud, which he's done throughout his career, but who doesn't?
We've all done that.
Yeah, right. But Derek Carr, I say he's matchup proof because of the offense that they're in. John Gruden, he trusts Derek Carr to get them into the right play at all times. And that leads to him being basically a point guard for the Raiders, where he's just making the decision about who's going to get the ball on any given play. And he's just getting it out to these 5 eligibles. And now, like you said, with Josh Jacobs being out, that's just more pass attempts there for Derek Carr. This run game is not going to be as good. He's going to have to throw it. And, there's this fallacy in the fantasy football community, I feel like sometimes, where players just can't get better or they can't, learn a system and become more comfortable in it. And Derek Carr has spent now, 4 seasons in playing for John Gruden in this offense. You spend 4 years of your life doing something. You don't tell me that you get you become an expert at it, or you become more, better at it, or master it a little bit better. Right. So that's all Derek Carr has done, is master his craft. I mean, this is a guy that has talent as well, as much as he gets, crapped on, I feel like, but he's surrounded and he's in a good offense. He's got Darren Waller. Henry Ruggs is playing well now. So I like it, man.
We do have a question in the chat. We need to fill 2 here, John. Running back, receiver, and flex spot. So RB2 and a flex. So we got Henderson, Gaskin, Pollard, Jamal Williams, and Mitchell for the running backs. I will say this. I like Elijah Mitchell if he plays the most of that group. Gaskin was my option with Tua out. I think that game sucks. So I've really lowered him. I'm going to be lowering all the Dolphins with Tua out. I did not like what I saw out of Brissett. A quarterback just coming into a game is never going to be a very successful operation anyway. But Brissett is not a player that really extends any sort of, fantasy production for anyone on a day. So Mitchell's a favorite of those guys for me. I'm actually going with Devonta Smith in that Dallas Cowboys game. There's been a lot of receiver production through 2 games against Dallas. Even there's not been there wasn't a ton of scoring in that week 2 game against the Chargers. It was a huge disappointment for me. But Devonta Smith and Elijah Mitchell are currently my favorite picks of those guys. What say you?
Yeah, I'm actually gonna I'm gonna agree with you there. Well, only slightly because Michael Pittman is definitely in the conversation for me. I mean, even if Carson Wentz doesn't play, I think he's assumed the alpha role in this offense. This Tennessee defense is not great. He could see 10 to 11, 12 targets. So man. So I'll definitely go Elijah Mitchell though, because I was big on him last week. Still got the touches, the opportunities, but I might have to go Pittman. Although I do like your Devontae Smith
I
take
love it. Yeah,
because he's 17th in wide receiver target share over the last 2 weeks. Almost 27% of the team targets. Dallas has given up production to the wide receivers, like you mentioned, and that game should be good from a scoring perspective. So I don't hate that one as well.
Yeah, Devonta Smith's going to come up a little bit later. It's kind of like I kind of said it too early because he was one of my wide receiver options for today. But there's a lot of situations that play out with a few teams. That's really the way I'm staying away from Pittman. I don't know what to make out of Easton because I believe we've had Carson Wentz already ruled out for week 3. So between him and Waddle, I'm just not really. So he needs a third guy. If he needs a third guy, Tony Pollard. So I go Smith, Mitchell, and Pollard, who's actually been the best running back of the two over there in Dallas. Because Gaskin was my pick. Currently my RB24 after Tua has been ruled out, was my RB16. If it's PPR and you still want to possibly pick up some receiving points, there's a possible safer floor with Gaskin, but Pollard so far in the Dallas offense, I do respect that. Here's the thing. It depends on how much you respect the Eagles' run defense, and that will be your real decision on that. Jamal Williams, I'm not in because Detroit's playing Baltimore, I believe. I think that game gets kind of wacky. Henderson might not even play, and regardless, he's playing Tampa Bay, which means no for running backs. So really, it's between Mitchell, Gaskin, Pollard, and Smith and Pittman. So really those 5 options, you need 3 guys. And my 3 favorite right now will be Mitchell, Pollard, and Smith. It looks like you go Mitchell and the 2 receivers.
Yes, I go Mitchell and the 2 receivers for sure.
There you go. So now you got to take a coin flip of who you like better of the 2 of us.
And the 2 receivers being, Pittman and Smith.
Pittman, Smith, yeah, which is fine. So, but moving on to running back, which I think is just awful this week. I hate it. It's bad. There's like 7 good plays and everyone else stinks. So I'm going to throw it over to you to start it off. Oh, I didn't have a second quarterback. Oh, no, Derek Carr. Okay, no, we're good. Go running back.
Yeah. By the way, I guess I didn't hit I didn't give my calls from last week. Teddy Bridgewater, Baker Mayfield, both hits from last week at the quarterback position. Moving on to the running back position, I had a hit and a miss. Elijah Mitchell being my miss, Devin Singletary being my hit. And I'm going to this week, I'm going to take a page out of your book. I haven't done this one all year yet. I'm going to go with a guy that we shouldn't play with, that we shouldn't. I'm not even going to say we shouldn't play him in the top 24. I just don't like where he's ranked at 14 expert consensus rankings. That's Antonio Gibson, who is going up against Buffalo. And, this Buffalo defense, they've been really good against running backs. They're going up they've given up the 3rd best PPR production to running backs at 9.1 per game to the running back position. And according to Football Outsiders, adjusted line yards metric, Buffalo is 4th in that metric in terms of yards allowed. They've allowed 3.6 yards per touch. That's not carry, per touch to the running back position. They're one of 9 teams that have not allowed a touchdown to opposing running backs, either through the air or on the ground, through 2 weeks. And on top of all of that, J.D. McKissic was productive and involved in the passing game last week. That could just continue to be a thorn in the side of Antonio Gibson. So I think it's tough sledding. Probably finishes outside that top 24 range this week.
Yeah, I got to remember what my picks were because I write 4 names down for each position before we come into this. I believe I had Cousins, and I think I either talked about Matt Ryan or Jalen Hurts. But they all did pretty fine for all things considered. But I know I nailed Cousins because I love that game.
Yeah, you were all over Cousins.
I want to say Hurts was the other guy, but I'm not particularly sure.
I don't think you were as high on Hurts.
Yes, that is it. So which is fine because that game went bad, but he earned it with the rushing, so he still had a good day. But I wasn't completely all in on it. So again, I can nail things if I say they're gonna be bad. Like Saquon Barkley has my running back 20, and he wasn't great. And Kareem Hunt, I believe, was the other player I talked about because Josh Jacobs didn't play. Kareem Hunt, I thought it was going to be a lot of him and Nick Chubb, which is what happened. Just the touchdowns went to Demetric Felton and Baker Mayfield. So what are you going to do? But running back for week 3. And I love your pick with Gibson because I like talking about players that we have to think deep on. And one that's really been in the news a lot has been Clyde Edwards-Helaire because no one likes to play Clyde Edwards-Helaire anymore. Well, congratulations for him. I really wanted to sink him as low as I could in my rankings this week, but I can't because he's playing the Chargers, who currently have the most fantasy points allowed to the position. So now I'm stuck making him a top 20 running back. And I think everyone's kind of nailed it. They think he's just a matchup dependent sort of. He's just going to get rushing because he's no longer considered just involved in this passing game for whatever reason, which is strange because it was like this before he started playing last year. We thought he was going to be a pass catcher running back. Then he comes out in week 1 and starts kind of rushing on fire, and he's lining it up. We thought he'd be a top 5 back after that week 1 demolishing of Houston, whatever it was. It turned out it was just Houston, and then they added Le'Veon Bell, and we thought, okay, well, no Le'Veon Bell now. But they don't care about him. They don't care about him. But in this matchup, I think the game of the week with the Chargers and the Kansas City Chiefs, I believe it's the highest implied over-under, 55. It's tied with a few of them. Chiefs, Chargers, Bucks, Rams, Seattle, Minnesota, all 55.5. There are 3 good games, and everything else kind of stinks. Because if you think Jacksonville is going to keep it within 8 points against Arizona, which I do not think. But that is just a really tough one because I thought he was like an automatic sit, and I see this matchup on the field, and it's like, okay, no, you still have to play him as a top 20 player. So no one's going to want to start him, and they're like thinking, oh, he's just going to be bad. He's going to be awful. Well, Chargers currently are the best matchup. You've had success for Ezekiel. You've had success for Tony Pollard. You've had success for Antonio Gibson. These are 3 good players, but we're also considering everyone's to think that Elliott is an inefficient running back, and Antonio Gibson, we're worried about his production after week 2. So the Chargers are allowing a lot of work on the ground. Clyde Edwards-Helaire is pretty much only doing that. There's a good chance for him to score in, I think, a very high-powered offense situation. The Kansas City Chiefs, the only team to score and be allowing over 28 points per game. So their games are the games for fantasy. So you want to have Clyde in your lineups this week. If you want to bench him next week, by all means, after he has like 10 points. We're hoping for 16 with the touchdown, but there is the risk with him. But I do think he should be in there for you this week.
Yeah, definitely. I've got him as my RB15 this week, so I think he's totally got to be in your lineup. There's always upside for more in this Kansas City offense, right? I mean, the opportunity. They're always going to be the highest implied team total. They're always going to have the highest implied team total on the week. So there's always going to be opportunities to score some touchdowns here. My second running back is going to be Javonte Williams. I tried to go to this in week 1. It didn't completely come through, but I'm going back to the well and here in week 3. He's the expert consensus running back 27, has a team leading 27 rush attempts over the last 2 weeks, and no less than 50% of the running back rush share, going up against the New York Jets defense that has been decent against the run, but the Broncos have their highest implied team total of the season thus far at 26 points. They're 10.5 point favorites at home. That's always good game script for the running backs. Javonte has been coming along these last couple weeks. He's getting close to breaking some big runs, and I feel like the breakout game is going to happen sooner rather than later.
Yeah, and my second one, I don't want to just say Tony Pollard because I think congratulations, it's Tony Pollard week sort of deal. But the second guy I want to make one because we had Elijah Mitchell week after week 1, and now we've had Cordell Patterson week after week 2, which means I want to talk about Mike Davis because we have to say that he's still the lead back and he's still getting the more. He's leading the running backs in snaps and touches and carries. He's leading all of that. The one thing I will say for Patterson with his snaps last week, he scored touchdowns, which is great because those look like fantasy points. It looks like he had an awesome day, right? The one thing I will say for him, he was on the field for around 24% 24 plays last week. He touched the ball on half of the time he was on the field. I do think he gets more field time because Russell Gage might miss this game. If he's out, then it changes things a little bit. I like Patterson more as a running back. But Mike Davis, if there's one thing the Giants are going to be apparently exposed to, it's receiving backs. So we saw that with J.D. McKissic. We're not going to see 40 yards sort of stuff. But Atlanta still wants to get Davis involved. At least saw 7 targets last week, caught all 7 passes. Those are very important PPR numbers. You still need, and again, in a week that I would look at, for full PPR and half PPR, if you're looking at a player who can get 7 targets and who can pick up work in different sort of ways, because I'm still a little worried about exactly what's going on with the whole Calvin Ridley 200 target season, because they're not really, really involving him as much as I want him to. So if they start doing that, then maybe it hurts Davis a little more. But until they decide to, it's just Calvin Ridley as this offense, Davis is going to be involved, and I still consider him the lead back. Now, is Cordell Patterson a fine pickup? Sure, I rank him higher at running back than at receiver because running back stinks. But Mike Davis is a top 24 option after last week where I said you should not be starting him. It was outside my top 30. Now I am back on Davis. It's, again, a very awkward spot. I would start him ahead of Tony Pollard, again, who is in my top 24. But Myles Gaskin, James White, both Broncos running backs, I'd be starting Davis over all of them in a full PPR situation.
Yeah, I mean, I still have Davis as the lead back in this backfield. I actually have Davis pretty high this week. Running back 8. So it's
that is very high. I have him in the 20s.
Yeah,
I am not as spicy as you.
I've got him as running back 8 this far. I mean, the volume that he's got combined with the matchup that's here, and the touchdown opportunity that he gets, I think Davis is definitely an intriguing play. Patterson is definitely intriguing, though. He's more intriguing on my bench than he is in my starting lineup.
Thank you. That's, again, he was a fine pickup in the sense of what they're going to use for him going forward. But people were they just don't like Mike Davis. They wanted Wayne Gallman to be the guy, and he's been inactive for 2 weeks. And I think that's just a more matter they're trying to get him up to speed with this Atlanta offense, possibly, or he just doesn't really play into their plans at all. But Mike Davis, the whole big thing about him was he didn't have anyone trying to take his job. So everyone like, oh, okay, now there's someone trying to take his job, so we have to get on that guy. Davis is still good at what he does, which is catching passes. That's it. That is valuable. Do I think he's an overly good runner? No. But as long as he's catching 7 passes a game, I do not care.
Honestly, last week I was watching the Atlanta versus Philadelphia game, and every time Cordell Patterson touched the ball, he just looked dynamic, like even as a runner, as a receiver. And so I actually was picking him up, in leagues where I had an extra bench spot. And then he had this breakout game, and it just kind of, reinforces.
He had a breakout game because of touchdowns. Again, he wasn't as heavily involved as people thought. He just scored twice in a game where they only scored 3 times, if that. So it's like, that's the whole thing. Touchdowns are king, and he ended up doing that. Am I floored by anything else he did? Not particularly. He's been a player that is just what he is. He's very athletic, and he's good when you get him in space.
But the difference last week, though, versus the week before was he had 9 total opportunities in week 1 and only 30% of the running back opportunities. In week 2, he ends up getting 14 opportunities and a 47% opportunity share compared to Mike Davis. So the fact that he looked good in week 1, and that led to more playing time in week 2, which led to those touchdowns. I mean, you have to just imagine, getting inside the head of a coach.
Yeah, you got to play what a score, right? Yeah. So I understand. Unless there's they weren't broken plays. They weren't, like Rondale Moore's touchdown against Minnesota, where there's literally no one standing around him for 40 yards. You're like, oh, okay, cool. No, they were quality plays, but they were not anything, again. Is it because am I too much of a Mike Davis guy? I've been told of such, but it's still, I think there's paths for both being successful, but it's a bad running back week anyway. So if you're going to start Patterson, at least do it as a running back, because there's not a lot of good plays anyone than a receiver.
No, definitely, absolutely.
But now we have to go on to receiver. So I'm going to kick it over to you. Who's your first receiver you want to talk about?
Yeah, man. So 2 receivers last week, both of them hit. Mike Williams came through big time for us, and then Cortland Sutton also came through. But I'm going to go back to the Cortland Sutton well again, because I think the man is still being disrespected. I mean, expert consensus rankings, wide receiver 26. He had a 35% target share last week. He's a grown man. I know all these guys are grown men, but Cortland Sutton makes grown men look like children when he plays with them on the football field. Goes up against the Jets this week, who are young, banged up in the secondary. Teddy Bridgewater only seems to have eyes for Sutton right now. Wide receiver 26 is just egregious, especially after what he did last week, especially after what he's done thus far through his career. This guy is just an alpha at the wide receiver position. He is a wide receiver one in a day and an age where we're looking for wide receiver ones with 30% target share. Sign me up.
Yeah, I think and it's my issue as well. I have in my top 19 now with some, because I'm going to talk about a whole game in a second, not just a player, a whole game. Cortland Sutton is currently my wide receiver 19. I think the only issue with this is how many points do the Jets score, and is it more than the number of fingers I have? And I got 10. So that's the real problem I have in this one. At least the one good thing that might lead in this game to being a better fantasy day, Bradley Chubb, I believe, is on IR. I don't know if he's out for the season just yet, but I saw he is not playing in this game, which sucks because we've never seen this guy like his full potential outside of one season, and I hate it. But injuries are a topic to talk about, and my first receiver is going to be an entire game. We had an injury situation last year. My two receiver picks, I believe I took Antonio Brown, who it's going to be that sort of situation with Tampa Bay, who actually might not have played this week because it's COVID, and Jarvis Landry, who I said was a trap. I didn't think he was going to get hurt, but I didn't like him. So I guess I'm pseudo right. Who knows? We'll never know exactly what Jarvis Landry was going to do in that game, but I didn't like him in particular. But week 3, all of the Pittsburgh and Cincinnati players, all of the receivers. Ben Roethlisberger with a pec injury. He might not play in this game. Deontay Johnson, he's looking good. End quote. We don't know what that means. He might not play in this game. Cincinnati, we have 4 different Pittsburgh Steelers, including guys like TJ Watt and Josh Hayden, who are currently questionable. If they play, this is a bad game. If they don't play, this is a good game for Cincinnati. And we just don't know yet. Later on the GR Weekly show, this is a 1:00 game, which is good for us because at least we'll know before we have to start other players, because those 4:00 games are very spicy. So if you are starting any of these guys over those 4:00 players, we're going to need to know this. So I'm actually balking on this game later on. But for all the Pittsburgh Cincinnati players, you need to be looking at the injury reports, because if Ben is not in there, that just sinks, I think, the whole Pittsburgh side. Because I've just not who to even have backing up Ben right now over in Pittsburgh.
I think it's Mason Rudolph.
Because I know they
Dwayne Haskins is on the roster.
That's the guy. Yeah, I was like, I don't know.
I think it's Mason. Based on everything that they've done in the preseason, I think it's Mason Rudolph.
Which doesn't give me much confidence in either guy, to be honest. So you need to be looking out for the injury reports for both sides. Let's say at least Ben plays. If Ben plays and Johnson's out, Juju Smith-Schuster is probably in my top 15 and Claypool's in my top 24. If Johnson's in, and which I'm currently ranking, and Ben's in, he's in my top 24. Juju's is right around side it. There's a very tough ranking range in there where like Cortland Sutton fits in is 19. Like 19 to 20 something is very tough. Because like guys like where Mike Williams was last week, he's no longer there because he's a top 15 play for me this week. Love Mike Williams. But you have like Antonio Brown who's moved out. So now you have the other Tampa Bay guys should probably be moving up. It's like such a real log jam right there. But that entire game you need to watch for and makes some more educated decisions about what's going to happen. I have to sneeze. No, I do not. We're good.
Well, there's one comment I'll make on that game. If if Johnson is out and Ben is out, I want Claypool because Mason Rudolph targets him relentlessly. And I would too if I was playing quarterback because that man is large and he's fast and he makes big plays. So I think I would be willing to play Claypool because he could conceivably see like 12 targets in this game.
Yeah, and if we do have the defensive situation injuries, because when I saw that happen last week for Vegas, this team gets a lot less scary. You know, without Bud Dupree left in the offseason, TJ Watt injured, they don't have that pass rush attack like they had in 2020. So if you lose those guys, and that's the biggest thing for Cincinnati is can they protect Burrow and they give enough time to do literally anything? If they can do that, then Cincinnati, the receivers, I do get a little bit more favorable leaning on them. But currently, this game needs to be watched out for in a lot of regards. I do have a question. What do we think of this trade? Zeke and TJ Hawkinson for Alvin Kamara and George Kittle. It says standard, which is a bygone scoring system for me.
I think I want the Zeke and Hawkinson side.
Yeah, in standard, Kamara is not as valuable, but I still lean Kamara and Kittle. I think the Kittle window closes really quickly. His 3 next games are very strong. Let me bring those up for us here. San Francisco, after week 2, plays Green Bay, Seattle, the Cardinals, and the Colts. I think the window closes really quickly to make trades for Kittle. I prefer the Kamara and Kittle side. I understand Hawkinson with all these targets. I like to think that Kittle gets that point. San Francisco's been very weird through 2 weeks. I do like that overall offense. I still lean I think the true elite nature of Kamara. They have to get this team figured out. They had 4 coaches last week. There's not really much you can do with that. But this is a very fair trade. I can at least say that.
No, it's definitely a fair trade. I just lean the Zeke Hawkinson side because I'm one of those that's not really panicking on Zeke. I think he's still an integral part of this offense. I think the Tony Pollard thing, it happened, but there's these guys run so many plays the Dallas Cowboys do that I think 2 running backs could live in this offense. And there's enough touchdowns that Zeke will be, the main benefactor of those. And then the Hawkinson thing, I think he's going to get so much work. He's going to get so much volume that, that's what, no other tight end outside of Travis Kelce and Darren Waller is getting what Hawkinson is getting on, through 2 weeks. In terms of the Alvin Kamara side, I mean, injuries are a thing and they happen, but, if you go back and you look over the seasons, over the years, there you go.
How far I had that sneeze? There we go.
Over the years where Alvin Kamara is really getting, he's really leaned on for the Saints, where he's getting 20 plus carries a game. He breaks that. He ends up breaking down, whether it's like through a high ankle sprain or an MCL sprain. I mean, again, running backs do, but Alvin Kamara has done it every time he's seen that increased workload. And the Saints have always made an effort to use multiple running backs and to not use Alvin Kamara in that way. So
yeah, I think just because it's standard. If this was half or full PPR,
if this was half or full, I'd probably on the Kittle and Kamara side. But because it's standard, I'm gonna go with Zeke and Hawkinson.
But second wide receiver, lay it on us.
Yeah, second wide receiver is I'm going with the guy. I know that you referenced weeks, and one of the weeks it is Hollywood week. Hollywood Brown, expert consensus rankings, wide receiver 32. Players with larger than a 30% target share through 2 weeks. Deebo Samuel, Cooper Kupp, Brandon Cooks, Deontay Johnson, and Hollywood Brown being 5th. Gets to go up against Detroit this week, who has a defense that's giving up 15.3 yards per reception. 2 wide receivers. That's the 8th highest in the NFL. I know a lot of the fantasy community got burned by Hollywood Brown last year to the point where we stripped him of his nickname. He was simply Marquise. But over his last 8 games, he's on a 16-game pace, 114 targets, 76 catches, 1,040 yards, and 16 touchdowns. Continue to play him and enjoy the output that he gets you this week.
Yeah, that's definitely one of my guys. I had him I wanted to springboard to being a good pick after. I still want to see what happens when Bateman comes back. But currently with him, not in the picture, that is a situation for me that we're thinking favorably of Hollywood for the time being. Do you have a second question? What are you doing with Trey Lance? I still just don't think he starts this year. That's been my line the whole way. They are 2-0. Garoppolo has not turned the ball over, and they're not scoring a ton of points like they did, after that week 1 game. You can stash him if you want, but I don't have him rostered. That's just me.
Yeah, I mean, I would continue to stash him, but he's one of the first guys I'd look to if I need a roster spot. Just because, like you said, Jimmy G's played well. Granted, it's only been 2 weeks. And my concern isn't that Jimmy G is going to end up playing poorly. Jimmy G's just been known. I know injury proneness is not a thing, but some people get injured more often than others. And Jimmy G happens to be in that category where he ends up missing time. And if Jimmy G ends up missing any time at any point, and Trey Lance has to go in, I find it very hard that Trey Lance relinquishes that job back if he's playing well and the Niners are still winning. So that for that reason, I would hold on to him.
And my second receiver for
any problem, Jay? Hey.
Second receiver for week 3 is the number 1 receiver on the New York Giants, which is Sterling Shepard. Sterling Shepard, who has thrived in this offense. He is considered for me right now the primary receiving option. Kenny Galladay, he said he wasn't mad at Daniel Jones and he was just mad at Garrett, which is understandable because we're all mad at Garrett because we wanted Kenny Galladay to get all this money and get all these touchdowns and targets. But I am ranking him over Galladay. He's knocking on the door of my top 24. A player in this spot last week was Mike Williams, who's now a top 15 option for me in week 3. Can we have a Sterling Shepard type sort of springboard to the top 24? I would love that. If it's Pittsburgh-Cincinnati game goes sideways, I think he makes it in there. But he is, for me, in all considerations, currently the guy that I'm thinking of as the wide receiver 1 for New York. There is a situation if Evan Ingram comes back, does that mix into and change everything? Possibly. But one thing with him, he is seeing targets basically weekly. I think he has not seen under 5 targets, more than 2 games that he's played fully in this system. He's getting good work weekly. And whenever even he's not getting the boom weeks, possibly have, in the few weeks past for the 2021 season, he is going to be a safe option. When you're looking at flex players, this is a great guy. Unless you have a top 20 type receiver, Sterling Shepard seems to be one of those, my favorite, flex receiver options. He's battling right there with Devonta Smith, and it's kind of which guy would I rather rank of the two? I currently lean Shepard in this very excellent Atlanta matchup. But if Devonta Smith outscores him, I'm fine with it. I love both players this week. If you have those as your only 2 receivers, I think you're probably in an okay spot if your running backs and tight ends and all that sort of stuff just are stellar for week 3. But John, any more comments on receiver before we wrap up tight end? We've gone a little long today.
No, man. Sterling Shepard was actually my just in case you went and took one of my other receivers. So I absolutely love it this week, man.
So moving on to tight end, I'll start off real quick with it, which was Evan Ingram. I want to just bring back on that. If Ingram is healthy and playing, and there's no limitations on him, tight end this week towards the bottom is kind of not great. So if he is active, it's really Logan Thomas against Buffalo is not a player I think is really rewarding of a top 12 spot. If Evan Ingram is active, he is a top 12 tight end for me. It's just a matter of, is he active? Is there any limitations? If he's full bore, and I think we just had the 10 days off, him, Saquon, both receivers, this could be a real nice blow up spot for the Giants, who I said their season starts this week. They had tough matchups in week 1 and week 2. They're banged up. They had a short week. There was no team in the NFL worse in a spot to be on a Thursday night football game than the New York Giants offense. And then they almost won that game too. But here against Atlanta, I think they get a win. And they go play the Saints, who no one has any idea what to think about that team. But I think they can go and rebound off these 2 losses and have good fantasy productions from their major players who are now healthy, who are now in good spots to produce. Daniel Jones is not imploding. There is a good spot for all these players to be fantasy options. If Evan Ingram is out there and you're looking for a tight end, if he is active, start him.
No, I totally agree. Evan Ingram was one of my sleepers at tight end position coming into the season. If he's starting, there's definitely an opportunity here to get him in your lineups.
So you should tight end there, John.
Yeah, so kind of recapping last week real quick, I had Dalton Schultz, which was a miss. I think you had Jared Cook because I have him written down, but I think you
Cook. I talked about Cook and Goddard. So last week was for receivers was Brown and Landry, and again, it's kind of weird because I don't particularly say they're all winners. I say they're just again, it is a flex and roster decision show. But Jared Cook and I believe it was let me see. Would you say you said Schultz?
I also had James O'Shaughnessy,
who got
by the
hurt,
way,
unfortunately.
3 plays, 1 catch, 24 yards. Could only imagine what else would have come from that. But now he's on IR, and we'll never know.
Yeah, we kind of picked a lot of players who got hurt or have been hurt. The thing, everyone got hurt. Week 2 was a disaster.
Yeah, it was absolutely.
So week 3, again, the matchup sucked, but of course we're going to have like 3 games with like score totals of like 70 plus. That's just what's going to happen. But who's your tight end for this week?
Yeah, so going back to a week 1 well here for me, Cole Kmet, expert consensus rankings, tight end 16, goes up against Cleveland, who've given up the 12th most PPR points to the tight end position. He's played over 70% of the snaps each of the last 2 weeks. Only saw 1 target last week, but if there's anything I've learned about Justin Fields watching him in college, he likes to target the middle of the field, specifically those tight ends, especially when they get down to the red area. Back at Ohio State, he was constantly looking for his tight ends. Cole Kmet, I think, had 7 targets in week 1. I think the matchup's good here, and with the rookie quarterback and Justin Fields, should look to get Cole Kmet more involved.
And then my last tight end, we got a real quick question here. Should I trade Mike Evans for Mike Williams? Not knowing the scoring system, I still lean Evans, even though I have loved Mike Williams for 2 weeks. And it's tough because that feels almost like a net neutral, but I lean to the player who I think is the better talent, which would be Evans. I think there is more chaos potentially with that, but I love the matchup this week. So if you want to at least get like the better option out of the week here, Antonio Brown, I'm currently not expecting to play in the game with the positive COVID test. So it says PPR. In years past, Mike Williams has not been a PPR option, but he has been this year because they're really changing with the new offensive style under Joe Lombardi. They're changing the style. I still lean Evans, but I completely get it for Williams, who is a top 15 receiver for me in week 3. He's just not playing Kansas City every single week. Tampa Bay has been a team that has scored like 4 touchdowns for 6 weeks straight, going back to last season. This offense is just on fire, and I think I want whatever piece I can have of it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But I think that you should try to get more out of this trade, right? Like Mike Evans, maybe you could try to flip Mike Evans and get, use the name value of a Mike Evans and try to get Mike Williams plus something else, right?
Or 2 for 2 and Williams plus, get a better running back, something like that.
Yeah,
I think the straight up trades for the same position, I'm never particularly on, because you're just kind of saying, all right, who's the better guy rest of the season, especially when they're very similar sort of. Because again, Mike Williams is now in, I think he's still in the lower tier than Evans, but he's in the conversation. Like I said, this is not a crazy trade at all.
Yeah, no, absolutely not, for sure.
But yeah, I like your idea. We're trying to get Evans plus or make it a bigger trade. And again, sometimes people don't like that. They're like, I just want to kind of move one guy. And if it's just that situation, I think I still lean Evans rest of season, even though there's the chaos involved with them. But Mike Williams has never been this good. So, there's that.
Yeah.
But my second tight end before we already did the trade, I traded Mike Evans, throwing Shepard for Mike Williams and Marvin Jones. I think I probably would have liked the Evans and Shepard side.
I'm with you on that one.
Yeah.
I would prefer the Mike Evans and Sterling Shepard side.
Marvin Jones, though, is the only player in Jacksonville I think is worth starting right now. I will say that. That team is garbage. And Marvin Jones, though, I think one of 4 players, along with Brandon Cooks, Mike Williams, they all have 20 or so, around 20 targets. They've scored over either multiple touchdowns or 200 yards. There was a lot of receivers towards the back end of fantasy drafts that have had very good production. Mike Williams being one, Jones being another, Shepard, a whole bunch of group of players. But second tight end, so we can get the hell out of here, because I got a show and you got a show very soon. Going back to the Jared Cook. That game's great. Start Jared Cook if you want to. He's outside my top 12. I'd start Evan Ingram over him if he is active and no limitations. Otherwise, a lot of games suck this week, so try and kind of zero in on the games that are good. Kansas City and the Chargers, Tampa Bay and the Rams, Seattle and Minnesota. That's us for week 3 here on Off the Grid. John, any last? I
didn't get my second tight end, Jack Doyle.
You didn't get a second tight end. John, go.
Jack Doyle going up against Tennessee, saw 12 targets. the first 2 weeks combined should be leaned on in this offense that doesn't have much weapons in the passing game.
All right, cool. I thought he had 2 tight ends. He did not. But that is us here for Off the Grid on the Gridiron Ratings YouTube channel. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for all the questions today, people. I like that. If you liked what you've heard, I'm back here on the show in an hour going over all of the 1 p.m. starts and the Thursday night football game, or at least most of them, because there are some games that, I didn't have enough time to cover because I got school. I just got totally piled on with schoolwork this week, and B, there's a lot of injuries and a lot of just weird situations that are going on, so some that might be covered on the Friday show, so stick with us if you want that, but subscribe, like, comment, follow both John and I at Methodical One, at JR Football Nerd. John, any last thing for the people before I stop rambling?
Nope, we appreciate you, we love you, have a good one, good luck this week, we're out.
Bye.